Good evening, everybody who is listening to us on Vaughan Radio here tonight. We are the People Democratic Alliance. We are a public interest group, of course, and as you know, we've been with you every Monday for the last number of weeks. This tonight would be our last show for the year, as we look forward to Christmas and wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. Let me do that at the top. And again, we'll be back here in January, around January 13th, thereabout. Tonight promises to be a great show. My name is Glendale Herbert, your host, along with...
My name is Andy Liebert. Good evening, radio listeners. Always happy to be with you.
Good, Andy. It's a pleasure seeing you back with again, and for us to be here to you, to report to you, the people. Of course, everyone wants to see the best for our country. I think last week as we got out of the show, we were leaving the show actually, Mr. Liebert had intimated to you that we would have done a topic that dealt with geothermal as an issue that we wanted to discuss. But of course, we had the budget that was presented, and we thought that would be a very important issue to discuss because of the current nature of it. So we've decided to sort of push geothermal back a little for at a future date, where we'll be presenting on that matter, because we have a lot to say about that, of course. Andy, tonight I'll try and set the table. It's going to be a very comprehensive look at the budget from our standpoint that we'll take. But first, you think we should sort of tighten up? And last week, that issue that we began discussing about about representatives to go to St. Kitts. I think there's a little piece to that I just wanted to add to sort of tie it up, and I think we discussed how, it briefly that we did not touch that part of it that we think is quite valuable and could be of interest to those who are going to St. Kitts as federal ministers.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things we believe, we think, as we said before, we don't think that any federal minister, regardless of party, stripe, or color, coming out of Nevis should be sitting on an opposition bench in St. Kitts, and we really believe that. We really believe you ought to be in where policy is being made, and and at least when it comes to matters that affect Nevis, you would be always on the right side in terms of what comes home, what bacon you can bring home to the people. You're here to represent the people, we think. Not that we think, but we know. You were sent there to represent the people's interests, whether you're from Cotton Ground, like I said, or you're from Rollins, you're from Mount Lily. It doesn't matter. Whether you're in constituency number 9, constituency number 10, or 11, your views and your hopes and aspirations are to be met by your representatives. And why we believe this can work is because I pull from the examples that how the United States, how politics is done in the United States, for example. United States has 50 states. And every state, whether you're from Montana, New York, or Arkansas, it doesn't matter what state you're from. They sent a number of congressmen to Washington, and they sent a number of senators to Washington. It doesn't matter the party, Democrat or Republican. At the end of the day, if there's going to be a major project coming to a state that is designated for, let's say, the state of New York, and it's going to create value in New York by creating jobs, and it's going to create, an attraction to New York. I just use New York as an example, or California. Every representative from that state in the House of Reps, congressmen, generally line up together and vote for it, the package, whatever that package is. It doesn't matter the party affiliation. And because they're representing their people in their constituency, in their home state. Now it's the same thing. I don't see any difference in it. Some say the politics here is to rancor us and to divide is too big. I just don't believe that. I mean, in the United States, and I keep saying in the Civil War, in 1865, at the end of the Civil War, they had 600,000 people dead. I haven't seen anybody dead in Nevis. So it can be done. People can come together after you've done your job in St. Kitts and represent the people in St. Kitts. You come here and fight. You can do your politicking against the party that opposes you in Nevis. And in terms of the NIA, when it comes to the NIA and how that money was allocated or how that money was spent and managed and all that, you know, whatever that comes within that political ambit, you can have that argument and fight. So I don't know if you have anything which you'd like to say about it, Andy. What are your thoughts?
Well, we are on track, and I believe, and I would reiterate, that when you are elected to serve. And whether it's in St. Kitts or Nevis, that's the job you ask the voters to give to you. And so we expect representation at the highest level when you go to St. Kitts, whichever house you sit in.
Yes, I agree. And there's no benefit to be derived by sitting on an opposition bench. I just don't get that, you know, position. You know, there's nothing. You're there for 5 years, whatever it is, in the opposition bench, and you're not serving the people. So I mean, I think the politicians or those representatives who go to St. Kitts need to rethink this model that they've been on and the course they've been on, and recognize that if you're not in there and you're not making policies to know how things are going and to direct funding or to direct whatever it is, whether it's grants, whatever comes to the federal government, you're not really representing the people. And so I would just quickly pivot to the budget. Last week, the 2019 budget was released and was presented by our Premier, Andy. And we thought that it's quite important to have a look at the budget and give our opinions as to the direction of the country and what that budget means. For everyone out there, a budget is the biggest policy document that a government can present. When a government presents a budget, it tells you the intentions of the government. It tells you the interests of the government. It tells you where they actually what they intend to do in the government or what they have done. It's the biggest policy document that any government can put out. It's the main policy document that basically comes out. And in this budget, Andy, for 2019, which runs through September 30th, I think, yes, I think it's September 30th. It was presented October 1st. At least it goes until October 1st. This budget, Andy, let's take the categories. The total revenues collected in this budget for 2019 was about 114 million, round off 115 million. And 115 million in revenues was collected. Then the budget was, as we can say, topped up with some grants, with about $27 million worth of grants. And we presume that grants would have been part of the $2.5 million coming over from St. Kitts. St. Kitts, which some say subventions, which would bring the total revenue up to about $142 million. I'm rounding off the numbers. It's actually 141 million. In this budget, we notice there are a number of issues that might have popped up that jumped out at us in this document. One of the hair-raising things that came out of this budget was $18 million in red ink. When I say red ink in the old days, when you do balance sheet, or the accountants do these balance sheets and do budgets reporting, whenever there is red ink, they would write it in red ink to get the attention of those who are in charge, or whether it's a board or whether it's the people who set policy. They call it red ink to alert them that it's a negative. So in this case here in Nevis, we had about $18 million in red ink for this fiscal year 2019. Compared to last fiscal year 2018, which would have been last year, the red ink would have been 6.6 million. So, I mean, one would question how could we get to the $18 million in deficit? And there's a number of problems. that I identify and we see here from the trend from 2016 to 2019 in the budget. What we recognize in 2016, we recognized there was a level of monies that came from St. Kitts, which represents somewhere in the region of around $35 million. That's 2016. And then 2017, I mean, of course, we heard of when Team Unity got together, there was a promise of tranches of money coming over up to the tune of almost 300 million. As of now, we can ascertain close to 200 million that came over. 2019 and 17, on the other hand, they got somewhere in the region of $59.8 million, which is round off of $60 million. And then in 2018, the following year, which was the year prior to this year, a total of 53 million came over to make up on the budget. And that would have been monies coming from the federal government and from I guess CBI and all that sort of thing that was promised. So that came. So we had a lot of spending last year to the tune of 192 million, rounding off. And this year we went up to $142 million spending. Now, what is the problem? What tends to seem to me that has happened here, we recognize in this budget, Andy, that on the revenue side, in every specific area, there was a fall off. And in doing justice to it, there's a fall off in stamp duties, right? And VAT. That stamp duty is basically the sale of properties in this country, which is like generally 10% for ordinary people who sell and, who buy property and sell, transaction. 10% that goes to the government, and then let's say so it's like Four Seasons properties, I think it's 6%, and then I think land and housing properties 5% transaction. But there's a fall off in that area, in the stamp duties area, slightly. But what was significant was the VAT collection was much lower in that category in terms of stamp duty and the VAT collection, which is on top of that, in that particular area. Also, we found also that in the corporate tax, which is the taxes of business, and the social service levy, there was a fall off, particularly in the social service levy. The collection, the social service levy, which everybody who is working pays the levy, pays a portion on that levy, and we collected around 8.9 million last year. We would have collected 10.5. So we recognized there were a number of Four Seasons workers, like 400 plus people wasn't working for a number of months since June. So that might have been affected in terms of the amount of money that they could have collected in social levy. But a constant one of the things that jumped out as a major constant in this whole budget, Andy, was the supply office. The supply office that sells things like toilet paper, flour, whatever, and those things. They had that drop off to us was significant to the tune of $1.5 million from last year. And then at the same time, you had the water service tax, Andy, is constant. It's constant all the way from 2016 all the way to 2019, meaning $5 million is collected. And that's a constant. And why that is a constant is because in every year, the same amount is paid for water bills. It tells us that people are living the same amount or more people are living, and because the taxes are being paid at the same level. These people didn't, drop off or anything. But while the people are living, we recognize the consumption rate dropped significantly in all of these areas, in most of the areas, in terms of what people were purchasing. In the area of customs, in the area of custom duties and import duties, and the area of custom service charges, all of these here fell by at least easily 20% in collection, 20 to 25% in collection, 20% in most cases in revenue collection. That to me is significant. It tells me, it also says that even though people didn't have the wherewithal to purchase, because most of our goods come through the ports. And if we were collecting in custom duties, we were collecting like $9 million like last year, and we're down to $8 million this year, just in custom service charges. And then you go up again in areas where, you know, it tells us that people are not. It tells us that people are not purchasing as much and bringing in as much stuff. I don't know what you're thinking is.
No, it's obvious that there's a shortage of inflow of cash, and so people are strapped and cannot purchase, cannot do business. That's what that reflects, and it's dipping over the years in comparison. More significant this year.
Yeah, it's more significant in a number of areas, and we find, and another, even though one of the things we kept spending heavily in 2019, we spent $191 million. We spent we spent almost $200 million in 2019, 198 million, and a lot of capital projects we did. We spent a lot of money we spent a lot of money on capital projects because we got an injection of over $53 million from outside. And that spending carried over, right, to 2019, the pace of spending, and we only got $27 million from over the water. So the spending continues for 2019 at the rate of almost $200 million overall. That includes, you know, that involves everything we spent on. And this year, we got up to about about $160 million in spending, $40 million short. But we had to find money elsewhere to continue that rate of spending. We had to go to Social Security, and National and the Bank of Nevis, and got about, between them both, we got about $17 million, and about $7 million from Social Security injected in the economy here, and about $10 million from the Bank of Nevis. And that $10 million took the Bank of Nevis debt that we owed Bank of Nevis up to around $77 million, and Social Security up to about $32 million in total that we owe. So the overall debt of the country now is at about $456 million. And what that said to me is that every child born tomorrow, every child that's just born or born yesterday or going to born tomorrow, has a debt of about $36,000 starting off their life with.
That's right. It pushed our foreign debt up also, and it seemed to be growing very rapidly. And we have to be careful with the borrowing.
Yeah. What I saw also, in terms of the borrowing, we dealt with the external debt, which is places like the Q80 fund and all that. We have the external debt. We dealt with it last year, and we paid down on the external debt like we normally do. All right. And allocation, which is about $1.3 million, we paid on the external debt, and the interest, but on our domestic debt, we paid down about $12 million, but we were off target by $5 million, so we were $5 million in the red in the domestic debt. So one of the things I'm saying to myself, when I look at the Bank of Nevis versus National Bank, assets holding, total assets holding is about $3.7 billion. And the exposure, the lending exposure and the advances is about, it's about 700 million, I think, right? The total exposure, which is giving about 25% of their assets. Whereas the Bank of Nevis, right, is about, assets is about 560 million, and their exposure, total exposure to the Bank of Nevis is about 242 million, which put them about 40+% of the entire assets. You see the difference, almost twice as much as National Bank, heading in that direction. So the Bank of Nevis is heavily exposed at this point.
We're putting a lot of strain on the local bank.
Right, and it's the bank of credit for ordinary people, because you can't go nowhere else to get credit to do any business in Nevis. So, to me, I call it a system. It can create a systemic risk in the system where if you can't get money from the Bank of Nevis and they're tied up, they're at the edge. If they get to 50% then of the assets, which it takes about $15 million in borrowing, right? The bank would really be against its assets. The bank would really be, it can be a risk.
It's exposed, and it would be creating a problem for locals, ordinary people who want to borrow, would not be able to have the access to funds because the borrowing power of the bank has decreased quite a bit, and so it make it difficult for the local man to walk into the bank and be able to borrow and get to do things for themselves.
Currently, right, as state about where we are, you're right. If the bank is, if the bank gets to that point, the Bank of Nevis, we don't have a central bank here. When I say central bank, the government don't. The bank is used as the new Bank of Nevis is almost used like that. But when I look at the Bank of Nevis, which is about $500 million in assets, and if at $76 million exposure, okay, fine. Out of the $240 million that they've extended throughout, not just to the Nevis Island, but other people and other investments and stuff and loans that they've made, that can be quite precarious and something to keep an eye on, I think. That we all ought to keep an eye on, because most people can't go to Scotia. Well, I don't know about Republic, then and First Caribbean and get these kind of loans that they normally get. I don't think there's, it's a little more difficult from what I understand.
Well, the banks don't really tell you they don't have the cash. They just ask you to find a whole lot of things, and every time you go back, it's something else they need. They
frustrate you.
And you're frustrated, and eventually you have to give it up.
Yeah. So, our payment on interest, or interest payment on all of our external and domestic loans, right now is about $13.2 million. We paid $13.2 million. I mean, we really should have been about $17 million exposure in reality. But like I said, about $5 million we didn't pay to the domestic lenders. And the fact that the government is exposed to $101 million in treasury bills, right? That's owed to the ordinary people, and they have to make payments on those. That was the 4.5% normally. That was cut in this last budget. That was announced a 5% cut, 0.5% cut actually. Sorry, which brings it down to 4% on those treasury bills. So I mean, there have been cutbacks, not in terms of paying the domestic loans and T-bills, and that does not tell a great story at the moment. But the one upside to this, to what I see in terms of expenditure, is emoluments. The government did a good job on emoluments, in my opinion. And the good job was they're taking it from $78.5 million in spending on emoluments, would be salary, wages, and traveling money and all that sort of stuff when they go abroad. And they've cut back a lot on that, and they've brought it down to $62 million, a $16 million swing here, at least what's been reported. But the other areas does not look, the red ink of $18 million is a worry added to the overall debt. It brings it to $456 million. And that is something that one has to be concerned about going forward. Because what is happening, if you would let me digress slightly, in our country, I believe there's a number of factors underlining this whole thing. One of the things I think is what we have to look at closely, I think, of course, we need investment in the country. And when I say we need investment in the country, is that we need foreign capital in the country. And foreign capital meaning that foreign exchange. We need, every time we have dollars moving out of the country fast. I think the immigration strategy, we need a strategic approach to immigration in Nevis. I think we have a lot of people who are here. I think our immigration policy is uncontrolled. And I don't know if you see it that way, Andy. What do you think?
Well, immigration, what you have, and I want people to understand, when it comes to immigration, what we're talking about here is foreigners coming to the country and they're working, and they take most of that money is leaving the country. It's not circulating in the economy. And so if that is going to happen, it would mean that government would have to find other ways of generating revenue and creating a stronger economy. We are not seeing, from the budget standpoint, any growth in the local economy. We're not seeing that. What you can derive from what we're seeing with that budget is that quite a bit of foreign exchange seem to be going out of the country.
Yeah, I think if I were a betting man, and I don't know the facts, the clear facts, but I do think at least 30% of what they earn, let's say foreigners who are here, what they earn goes back out the country, because they send money to their people at home. They came here for a better life. And that's generally the case. So if you say 30% going out, I'll just use a little scenario. One of the problems, before I go there, one of the problems is that we have a lot of persons, but it affects planning, Andy. It affects the planning of government when you don't know who's in the country. And not only that you don't know who's in the country, but you just have everybody in the country, and you cannot plan. Departments cannot plan effectively. Even if, let's say, you take social service, or you take education, or you take health, you have to know, for example, in those areas when you're planning and you're marking up the budget, how much you're going to spend in each of these departments, how much desks you may have in your schools, and how much available desks there are for students, and do you have enough? Based on, because if you don't know how many people are in the country, you really can't plan. If you're in, for example, how many teachers you will need for the size of classroom, you can't, you have to be, government has to be able to plan their budgets. In health, for example, you need to know how many hospital beds you have. Can you accommodate, and all these nuances, can you accommodate, do you have enough to accommodate who is in the country and all that? And on and on and on. And when you have uncontrolled immigration, that is what you tend to have. You can blow your budget apart. And, we welcome people to come to the country. Most of us went abroad. I have family who went abroad also. And everyone went for a better life. But at the same time, you must be responsible and attract people, based on need in a small place like this. A lot of people, for Andy, for example, would say, the counter argument, well, everybody, went abroad, or people, Nevis people go abroad and what have you. And, we want more people in Nevis so the economy can move. But listen, the more people in Nevis so the economy can move. Haiti got a lot of people. You got 11 million. Santo Domingo got maybe 10 million people. So what's the story?
People really don't drive your economy.
Exactly.
They should help to drive the economy, but it all depends on the development and the government plan to drive the economy. What is lacking is diversity, where we find that no emphasis and no planning is being put into developing up a strong economy. And we are seeing that most of the local businesses are closing down. And if the local business is closing down, it means that engine, that fuel that you need to go into the fire to keep the economy going is falling off. government need to address that.
A good example of that is the corporate income taxes which are collected. Has been down. Corporate income tax has been down over last year, and there must be shrinkage in the economy, because if you have monies going out, let's assume the country had $1,000, 1,000 to circulate through the economy, and every time people get paid, let's say you're a foreigner, you send 30% of your money that you earn out. And let's say, so every month you send $30 out. Let's use $30, right? Out. When you get to your 10th month, you would only have maybe 600 what it is, $700 in your account, in the country circulating. To every one of us, that's $700. We all got to buy. You got to buy a washing machine. You got to buy food. You have to buy a stove. The other person got to buy wheels for the car. And the 700, you understand? But this money got to move, and the economy begin to choke off on its own. You see? So people can say, oh, we need a lot of people in the country. But if you're not getting foreign currencies, absent of what is called a foreign exchange board in this country, and I'm not advocating for it because it has its negatives, but if absent of that, you don't know how much foreign currencies in the country, or currencies in the country, generally speaking.
Well, what I would say to that, though, if you're going to open your doors to foreigners to come into the country, then there should be the checks and balances. And so once you open your doors for them to come in, then you would have to have those mechanisms in place.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you would lose your way, and you would not know where your cash is going.
Exactly. And as the economy strangles off, meaning that is less and less dollars hitting everybody, standard of living begin to drop. So that is why it's critically important to begin to think of foreign investment. And foreign investment simply, like even an airport or whatever, the airport development and these sort of things, work on those things, because those are, to me, hot button areas where it can ignite an economy. And because every tourist person coming here and drop a dollar, a foreign currency, it's dollars you didn't have in your economy. You understand? So you need to continue to think about replacing them dollars going out of the economy if you're inviting so many people into the country. And I do believe in immigration, but it must be targeted in a small country like this. I frankly believe that should be the thing, and it must be well thought out. You just can't just have everybody walking willy-nilly to the country and think you will proceed. It's going to diminish standard of living. And those who have made it here and are making it and having a good life, I'm sure they are thinking the same thing, because they want to maintain their lifestyles.
That's right.
So, so it's to me, it's critically important. We'll go for a break for a quick hot minute and come right back.
Rise. People open up your eyes. Produce, that's the answer. Produce. Develop our own, use our own, and own our own. Despite our political views, we must all understand that we are part of this island. And the same stick lick in the wild goat, the same stick lick in the tame. Everybody drifting in the same boat, we all sinking just the same. Some of them are claiming that they have this country at heart, but their actions are showing they're splitting the people apart. Man, they pulling and tugging, we so colorblind we can't see. There's no wonder we are used and abused constantly. Rise, 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 rise. People open up your eyes.
Yes, thanks again. We're back with you again. Continuing where we left off, a shrinking economy. And that is, of course, demonstrated in the budget, where the shrinkage is, where the collection rates have been down. No, and even if we had those 400 persons back at work, we wouldn't meet the numbers that we met last year or the year before. Statistically, it's impossible. If you look at the numbers really close. The production inside the economy in terms of revenues, where we collected last year, for 2019 actually, like I said, it was $114 million in total revenues we collected, and we had a $27 million injection from as a grant, which generally comes over which they talked about coming over. As of now, when I count it, we almost close to $200 million in terms of grants. When you run the grants numbers, between 2016 and currently where we are right now. We're almost there. We had 35.5 million in 2016. We had almost 60 million in 2017 injected. We had 53 million in 2018, and we had 27 million in 2019. A significant fall off in terms of subvention or whatever the money coming over. That is something to keep your eye on, Andy.
Yeah, it's really something for us to take seriously because it's affecting us. It's affecting the country overall. It's affecting businesses, especially small businesses. Not enough cash circling around. People doesn't have enough money to buy. You find people can't pay their mortgages, and most of them are losing their mortgage to the banks. And these are all things that we need to understand, that if we have a shrinking economy like this, our people are going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
and the tax burden on the individual person is growing, is escalating.
Last year, right, which is a phenomenon to look at. Last year, in 2018, we spent about $33 million servicing our debt. That includes interest payments on the domestic debt to all and domestic institutions, including Social Security, National Bank, and the Bank of Nevis. We paid a total of $33 million last year. This year, we paid a total of maybe 27 million thereabout this year. Somewhere in that region, we paid that. That includes interest payments and the debt, and we were around $5 million short domestic payments to those institutions.
So the debt is
growing. So fiscal restraint is demanded, of course, but again, more fiscal restraint and more taxes is not going to help, because you can only tax the people but so much, and the people begin to walk away from the economy. So it's an idea now that the idea basically is that they will have to begin to seek foreign currency. Every tourist, let's say even you have a tourist ship, every tourist that spend $1 US, instead of to walk in, let's say St. Kitts boasts 1 million tourists, and every one of them, let's say, not even every one of them, every one out of every 5 spend $1 in St. Kitts walking around, is foreign exchange coming in the country. That was never there before, you see? Yeah, and that is the phenomenon. So when money goes out, you got to have an infusion coming in somehow. And that is why it's so critical when people talk about foreign investment or investment period. Even if you can do local investment that attract foreign capital, So there's a task ahead of us. I mean, here in Nevis, we are not doing we are not doing all the things that we ought to be doing right now. In terms of, we have to do some rethinking.
That's right, and local investment that would attract foreign capital is one of the topics we spoke about previously, especially with the airport development.
Yeah, it's
that
critical.
Would bring some real tourist dollars, well needed tourist income into the economy.
Yes,
and it's something I think the government should look at seriously.
Yeah.
This is a way you grow your economy. And while you're doing that, you are empowering your local people.
I think
so. A lot of this money would stay in the economy.
Sorry. I think sorry, Andy. I think that when I look at the trends of money, the amount of money that came in grants, the emphasis in spending. I think when you spend, you must get a bang for your buck. I think when you spend money, you have to get what is called, must be exponential, a multiplier effect on it. So if you spend $1 million, you ought to be seeing $3 or $4 million out of every million.
That's
you
right.
Spend.
And that happens through investment.
Correct.
So you just don't spend. And what we're seeing is a lot of capital expenditure.
Yeah.
But we need to see spending going to investment.
Right.
We provide work and provide a turnover.
Right, exactly. I mean, some of the capital investments are good, but I think, in my opinion, and we talked about this, I think yes, two things that investors look, not a few things investors look at, foreign investors look at when they look at your country to, let's say, pour serious money into your country to do a development. They want to know your healthcare. What's your how is the healthcare? That's a question. And another question that's they want to know how they're going to get here. How are we going to get to your get to you? You know, and this, like I've said, I know normally say it's not sexy to for these boats. They want to know they can get here even if by a direct flight, even if they're coming on their private jets and they're coming in on their commercial jets or whatever. People want to know how they can access you. Those are two things. Roads are good, infrastructure roads are very good, and I think that is important. But again, the emphasis on dollars when you're thinking it through. How do we get more money in the country so that we can do all the other, nice ancillary projects that we like to see? Whether we want to build more a theater, or we want to build whatever we want to build. I mean, you really got to keep a focus on the money's coming in. And if you don't have a cap, I believe immigration, like I said, should be on a needs-to basis, and it should be targeted in areas where we need people and skilled people, it can create a drain to us because what your economy begins to get a nosedive, and your people begin to get frustrated. The ordinary man who may not be able to get a job, and another thing is diminishing wages begin to creep in because they will take a less money. Even if you choose to pay them below the minimum wage, and they keep quiet because they can't talk. They will take less money, driving down wages at the same time, driving down standard of living in the country, and that is a thing you have to guard against. So it's good to say, oh, we can get cheap labor and whatever the case is, but at what cost?
At the cost of a failing economy.
Yeah, and like I tell people, if you want a lot of people in here to buy at your shops, Haiti has a lot of people to buy at the shops. They have 11 million. The economy is strong. The Dominican Republic, and I can go on and on for many countries like that. That is, it's not about how many people is in the country or the size of the population. Because let me do a little study. If I have eight people in my family living in a house, and you have 3, it's easy to tell what is the demand in terms of spending. And I have to buy all the essential, you have to buy all the essential. But if we are making the same amount of money, you're coming out ahead every time. Yeah. So it's not about how many heads you can count. It's about what value you have and what kind of money you have in your household. And let's imagine if this is a household.
But the heads themselves, they have to be, for instance, a family of 8, and 6 out of the 8 are children, right? As opposed to a family of 3 that would have probably 1 child in that family. And the strain is really on the family of 8 because then there's only 2 people working.
Yes. And, another thing is that we're experiencing a lot in this country is the underground economy. With that, you got unchecked monies that doesn't go to the banking system and cannot be accounted for. And that is what, that is what where the world is going. The first world countries, they want to be able to know how much current money is in the economy, and they don't want unchecked monies moving around. You have it's prostitution has been introduced. Let's be real about it. And it is big. It's a service, of course, but there is also other illicit behavior that is under the radar that does not see the banking system, that not see the system, and is unchecked. And those money doesn't necessarily meet the ordinary person, because remember, like I said, when people earn, they send a lot of their money back to where they're from. So, it's creating a lot of problems. And again, we've always had an eclectic lifestyle here in Nevis compared to a lot of the Caribbean countries. We've always had a good lifestyle, high standard of living, and that we want to maintain, and it's within the interest of every citizen, and every citizen who have come to our shores and abide by the laws and become part of our citizenry. It's within their interest, and they would like to keep Nevis the way they met it, and we certainly would want to keep it that way. So when you know, the policymakers has to look at this, and the policymakers has to decide what kind of country they want, because we can't take on but so much, and we have a distinct culture in this country, and God forbid, you know, everybody protect their shores. Every country around the world is protecting their interests and the heritage and the history, and I think we have to decide, make a decision.
Well, one of the things we have to recognize, and we have to face it, is a reality that is hitting us. Our main business is tourism, and here in Nevis we don't have the port to accommodate a large-scale tourism by sea. We also do not have an airport, so that while we have a major hotel, we do not have an airport. So again, it puts us as a really big disadvantage. And the government have to look at this and be serious. We have this problem that is glaring us in our face, and we have to address it.
It's all about spending priorities, and that is what a budget is all about, presenting what your priorities are and what your sentiments are from a policy standpoint. And if you have, like we cited from 2016 all the way through almost $200 million in grants. And you know, you have to look like at specific areas where the economy can be excited. And you know, because you don't have sometimes you don't have a second chance at this, a second opportunity sometimes in life, and you have to make the best decisions. And I think, like I said, you know, the airport is a critical thing to opening up the country. It adds value to the country, lots of value, and it creates jobs. Yeah, it creates serious foreign exchange, as simple as you see it. It's serious fun because everybody comes in and they spend a US dollar. I mean, that's money money parked in the economy, parked up where we can use, and you're going to hit me, and you're going to hit all of these citizens who are going to be buying in the shops. That's more. Right. And it's just simple economics, you know. It's called the velocity of money. That's what they call it in economics. You know, it's how fast the dollar going to hit me and then hit you, because after a while people start to hold. You can see it right here. In the when I mentioned I forgot the term. When I mentioned the supply office, which is very critical, it tells you those are essentials, and you know, if that slip, toilet paper and them kind of things slip, in terms of you know, the revenues collected, the money is collected by government, it is telling you something significant that the people are holding tight. People are holding on, and that when people start to hold on, the money is not hitting the shops, because you know, throughout the country.
Well, the money is not reaching the people,
and or may not be reaching the people. Either one,
right.
You know, is not moving, and the velocity. It's called the velocity of money. How it moves from me to you, and you want the money to move fast.
Right, because these are necessities.
Yeah.
The things that supply office especially sell are real necessities, and I think that's why the government.
Give some examples of what they sell.
Things like toilet paper, and feed for your livestock, and milk, essential part of that, sugar, and you know, these are essential things. And if that is reflected there in the negative, then it telling a sad story, and it means that our leaders have to really go to work.
Yeah, because you know, it tells you the economy, there's shrinkage in the economy, is slowing down in that area, in the spending area of the economy, and it tells you also that you have to take a keen eye, because it also impacts lifestyles, diminishing lifestyles, and that is a critical thing for you know, for us. And you know, you can lead to all the behaviors that's out there that you can think of after, you know, in the outset. But as policymakers, like I said, they can't see everything, and you know, we're here. We give you what we have, and you know, you can now go and do the job as to what you think you ought to be doing. You know, they have the mandate to serve and run these things, and you know, avoid it's on them. But we can only sound the alarm, as they say, and let people know. Look, it's not right now. It's not a pretty overall picture.
Well, it's not, and it wouldn't be. And until government decide to tap into their human resources, invest in the people of this country, and give them the kind of support that they need in order to strengthen our economy would continue to be a failing economy. Because without that engine for the economy, and small businesses is what provide that engine. If the small businesses are not supported by government and strengthened by government, then we'll come back here next year with the same thing, and maybe on a bigger scale, that we find even our local banks can't take on this strain anymore.
Well, when you look at non-tax revenues, financial service took a hit because the financial service and this restraints that was been put on them on financial service, and they probably may take a hit to the tune of 30% based on what I'm seeing here. Last year we did 36 million in financial services. We did 14 million. This year we did 2 million, 10.1 million, 10.2 actually million, as opposed to 14 million dollars in financial services. That's significant. That's almost over 30% hit. Again, you can look again and see. It's quite interesting and sobering because, like I said, we were at a high of $198 million in spending last year. We came down to 160 this year. And of course, we did not get the fuel in, the amount of contributions that they normally get, so it came down. But yet, when it came down, the spending had to continue from last year into this year. So the deep borrowing had to take place, and it becomes the fiscal picture became a little bit, more. Picture became a little bit more ominous, or a little bit more, concerning. Where they had to make some real moves to stuff the gap, and we ended up with $18 million in the red.
Right, and you understand why government have to borrow more, because they're not generating enough income in taxes.
You can't. As we are, we can't. As we are, you can't tax the people much more. Well, you really can't, because where you're going to go? I mean, what areas you're going to go to taxes? We collect most of the taxes, import duties, and the sort of thing from importing stuff and VAT, and the 17% VAT, which is high. Where else you're going to go to create more? I mean, we have recommendations, but where else can you go? We have some serious recommendations that we think can change the picture, but.
Well, your tax rate would grow, your tax revenue would grow, but your tax revenue would only grow if you grow your economy.
Yes.
If not, you're going to be choking the workers with higher taxes, which they already can't pay. Mm-hmm. So it's incumbent upon the government to create an economy, to provide work, to encourage their citizens to invest. Too many small businesses are being closed down, and we need them.
And there's a phenomenon, I think it's called a Laffer curve. This guy won a Nobel Prize in economics for it, where they basically state that you can tax a person but so high, a people but so high, and then they start walking away from the system.
That's right.
And we find ways of not paying taxes, period, and not coming, tax avoidance. And you don't want to get to that point where where you have high taxes and people begin to get disincentivized in your economy. It happened in Britain. It happened in the United States at one point in late 1970s, going into 1980. Where I think Ronald Reagan came in and cut the taxes from 70% all the way down to 28%, because he was just saying the economy started to fire left, right, and center. So I'm saying, to the policy, the people, they have to be very, very mindful and consult if you have to. But the way we're heading at this point is, we're at a critical juncture, I think, based on where the way this looks.
Well, we give the investors a lot of tax break, and that again is hurting the economy because you're trying to encourage investors into the country, and in order to attract them, we run an economy that run out of taxing people, and if you try to get investors in, then you forfeit all those taxes.
There's a thing in for example, in a lot of countries they have a balanced budget requirement, and where you try to always produce a balanced budget. Even in most states in the United States, there's a balanced budget amendment that is there, and I think tax and spend, this sort of thing. I just don't think it works. I think we have to begin to think of trying to keep a spending in line with our revenues as much as we can, and hold the strain and try to create more investment in the country. And if you have to pass that provision or have that provision somehow that you have to try to get a balanced budget, but they are talking about government. I think that might be needed, because we cannot get. I don't believe this is sustainable the way we're heading right now. Like again, we were a kid in a candy store. We spent a lot of money on things. When we went up to $198 million in spending last, I think it's a year ago, and the year prior to that, we went into about our spending was about $204 million. The year prior to that, 204, and we took in $129 million in 2017, but we got an injection of about 60 million. We got an injection of about 60 million coming from over the water where we came. So that took us. Went up to 204 million, even though we had 180. That took 60 million, and that 129 million added up to 188 million. We spent $205 million that year. So, I know we're trying to pull back now, and is retrenchment. We're trying to pull back. We're spending 659.60 million this year, and we're still in the red, and it's not plausible. Well, again, we want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Our time is drawing near. We're just about to leave you. A Merry Christmas when it comes, and we'll be back here on around January 13th thereabout. We're looking forward to continue to speak to you, the people, and bring you the information. Not only the information you need, because it's your country, it's your direction you're creating for you and your kids, and you must be informed and you must know. Thanks again for listening to us, Andy.